And so when I think about an organization from a supply chain perspective that needs to be commercial, capable, and connected, what I had to really lean into, and I think this for me was a powerful enabler of my success, was curiosity. And if you believe in Murphy's Law, Murphy lives in supply chain. What can go wrong absolutely will go wrong every single day, but never the same thing, rarely ever the same thing twice. I think as a leadership trait, that willingness to ask questions and be curious about what can we do and what should we do.
And in fact, to finish this off, I posted on LinkedIn as a poll, more than 150 people, 110 people voted. And strangely, more than 70% people think they can achieve it, all of them together. But if you see the comments, they're all disagreeing with me.
But then came a winter storm that knocked out that supplier, where we're getting that material from one particular supply point, knocked that supplier's supply out, and guess what?
And it's been not now, I've been saying it for the last 2-3 years to all my customers, especially, buying technology, creating technology is the easier part.
That's actually absolutely the easy part, yeah.
Hardest part is a book, course, or mentor that shape your career.
Oh boy, too many choices.
Give one. The most unappreciated challenge in supply chain today.
We talk about it, but I don't think we appreciate it.
One piece of advice for young professionals just entering in the field.
I'd go back to my favorite word.
This video is brought to you by us, SCM Dojo. We provide awesome courses, guides, best practices for supply chain community. Hi folks, welcome to one more episode of the Supply Chain Show. As you know, we bring the supply chain leaders with a very distinctive view, modern view, futuristic view. And today I have someone very interesting. I met on LinkedIn. We had a chat before and I got really inspired. We have Derek Aranda with us. He is ex-Shell, a supply chain leader and executive. He is a senior supply chain consultant running his own practice. And we have a very interesting view about how to transition into agentic supply chain and what are the capabilities required. There's a lot of discussion about the technology part, which is fine, but technology in supply chain can only be adopted if there is a capability in the supply chain available, both people, process, systems. So we want to dig deep on this. Derek, thank you for joining. How are you, mate?
Thank you for having me on, Madhusri. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Right. So, people can find you on LinkedIn. You have a very, very extensive experience at Shell. Now you're a supply chain consultant. I just want to, take your, your high level views on how you think supply can be influenced and how we can make it capable, connected, and futuristic. So, what do you think?
Absolutely. No, thanks, Ray. I think this is a really important conversation for us to have as supply chain, right? I think, over the past several years, we've gotten out of the warehouse into the boardroom, right? The issues with COVID and the subsequent challenges have really elevated supply chain as a conversation, as a value driver within the organization. I think this is really then a critical moment for us to continue driving that value conversation forward. I've had the opportunity to work across the enterprise value chain, right? Starting off in finance, sales, strategy, and then subsequently into supply chain. And really, I've come to appreciate that we really are the beating heart of any organization that's putting products into the hand of somebody, right? We serve the purpose of giving them what they want, and we have the privilege of them paying us for that service. And I think any organization that doesn't recognize or appreciate supply chain really as a superpower, as a value creator, is missing a trick. And so when I think about an organization from a supply chain perspective that needs to be commercial, capable, and connected, it's really about having those foundational elements that allow a supply chain to move from just execution to value creation, to really being that entity that gives the customer what they're willing to pay us for.
Yes. I think you're very much right. And I'm glad that I think before COVID, everybody would, or most of supply chain people, and some of the procurement people still do on LinkedIn. I don't want to name any. Oh, we do not have a position to on C-level. Why we report to some, finance function? And I'm thinking that days are gone. I think supply chain is definitely on the board. They are one of the critical leaders who make decisions to make, business competitive advantage. Because right now I'm posting a lot, and you can see there's a lot of operational leaders, not just Tim Cook, few others. I recently posted about a CEO of Decathlon. He was a warehouse manager, logistics manager. Now he's a CEO of, $16 billion company. A post about Rivati. She was literally a sourcing manager when I was in Eton, and now she's a CEO of the Flex, which is $30 billion organization. So
Right.
a lot of supply chain folks are becoming C-level. Now, that means you can't become a C-level person without a leadership skills, right? And I can see there's a lot of very interesting books in your shelf. You got Supplier Excellence, and you got Range, you're definitely a good reader. But I want to pick a story. I want to pick a moment which inspires your leadership style, when which you think that leadership style, or maybe a story, should be, shared with a lot more people.
Right. No, no, thanks for asking that. As I mentioned, I came to supply chain sort of in the back end of my corporate career, right? So I started off in finance, in sales and strategy. So I supply chain for me was, while I recognize it academically, I didn't grow up in supply chain, right? So that's not my background. But I came in, I was leading a team that was responsible for managing our inbound raw materials, our contract manufacturing, and then the finished goods that we're procuring into our organization. And what I had to really lean into, and I think this for me was a powerful enabler of my success, was curiosity, right? And I think in supply chain, it's incredibly important that we're curious, that we're constantly open to learning and continuous improvement. And I think that really for me opened the door that made things like lean and CI just natural parts of my leadership style, because I came in recognizing that I did not have all the answers, that there's a tremendous amount of information out there that I would never be able to actually process myself. But what I had to learn to do is ask the right questions, to probe, to challenge, to get the team to think about what really is important, taking those problems and then breaking them down into the component parts. But I did that with curiosity. And as leaders, that for me is probably the secret weapon that we need to have within supply chain. Because look, supply chain is there's never a dull day in supply chain, right? And if you believe in Murphy's law, Murphy lives in supply chain. What can go wrong absolutely will go wrong every single day, but never the same thing, rarely ever the same thing twice, right? And so I think you really have to be open to asking questions and looking to understand, how do things connect? What's important to my supplier? What's important to my customer? What if we did this instead of that? And then engaging your organization to wanting to then learn and continuous look at how can we do that better. Now, we can certainly get into a lot more specifics, a lot more granular elements around it, but I think as a leadership trait, that willingness to ask questions and be curious about what can we do and what should we do is for me a powerful leadership characteristic to go into supply chain with.
Eager to learn, and I'm going to probably write a blog on this. Murphy lives in supply chain. That's pretty cool line, right? Uh, so I want to take your. I have a question on technology, but I want to double down on your experience of transitioning from finance, strategy, and into supply chain, right? And I recently made a post where I showed two footballs. One was like very clean, and one was very dirty. And I see
Yeah.
dirty one. This is how supply chain drive the cost out in supply chain, and the clean one. This is how finance drive the cost out. Basically that, and it went quite a bit viral. You got like 40,000, 50,000 views and 300 plus engagement. But the message was that it's very easy for finance people to say, yeah, drive cost out, cost reduction, bottom line, but actually very difficult to do, because you think of supply chain if you see in the P&L, is a support cost function, right? Okay. The freight and everything else goes into that element. Inventory, maybe the only, let's call it a balance sheet item, right? Everything else goes into the freight cost. But there's a huge pressure on the supply chain folks on continuously reducing cost for procurement function as well. Direct material, freight providers, and system providers, so on and so forth. Now, at the same time, they have this huge pressure on make supply chain resilient agile, and sustainable. And I think it's too much to ask. Because if you want to make it agile, you want to change your supply chain design. If you want to make it resilient, that means you have to have a different sourcing strategy. That means you might have to look into, near shoring, the right outsourcing. If you want to make it sustainable, that means you have to look into your packaging design, production design, product design, and logistic provider. All of that costs money, right? So I see these are very contradicting goals. And in fact, to finish this off, I posted on LinkedIn as a poll, more than 150 people, 110 people voted. And strangely, more than 70% people think they can achieve it, all of them together. But if you see the comments, they're all disagreeing with me. So the comments who did not follow the polls. So I want to take on first, is possible or not, because I want to double down on your experience as a finance guy and explain me what is this contradiction, right? Why people think they can do it, but comments says otherwise.
Right, right. No, it's a great question, a great challenge, right? What I always say, if you want it fast, it can't be cheap, or it can't be high quality, right? You can't get all of it at the same time. It can't be fast, cheap, and good quality. I think it's in some ways a false choice. And what I mean by that is when I think back to when we talk about what it means to be a commercial supply chain, it really is about how do you speak the language of what's important to the company. And that means being able to help them think through what are those trade-offs that we legitimately do have to make. I remember a classic example in our supply chain that we had a great deal with a supplier that provided a particular component that we needed for one of our products. It was a fantastic deal, and for years, we were able to monetize that relatively low cost, high reliability product. But then came a winter storm that knocked out that supplier where we're getting that material from one particular supply point, knocked that supplier's supply out, and guess what? We were now absolutely struggling to make the product that we'd been making a ton of money on for years now, right? So it became a question of horizon. For X number of years, that was the best deal we had. Overnight, it became the worst deal that we had because it imperiled our ability to provide one of our highest running products reliably, cost effectively. Digging out of that hole cost a ton of money. I don't think we ever did the math, but how much of those years, those good years that it clawed back, it was a substantial proportion of that. So it became the question, well, why did we do that deal? Why did we have that single source component that, yes, was able to make us money for X number of years, but why didn't we see that if anything went wrong, that it would have killed us? I think it boils down to a question of what was the conversation we were having? Where and how are we elevating? Here's a risk. Are we consciously taking that risk? Are we managing for that risk? And then willing to accept the consequences of that choice for that period of time in which we were able to really monetize it effectively. So I think that became a question of what's the horizon we're looking at? Because the edge case there was what killed us. But we did not have an effective conversation as an organization around, well, here is where I can be resilient under these circumstances at this cost level. But if something changes, here now is what that resilience is going to cost me going forward. Right. And I think as a supply chain, it's where and how do we actually have that conversation with our with our finance colleagues, with our sales colleagues that say, hey, it can cost us this under these circumstances. But if A, B, C, or D happens, here's what that now means to us. Are we willing to take that cost? Do we want this to be an OPEX or are we prepared to CAPEX this, right? We're prepared to invest into that resilience or into that quality or that sustainability because, yes, it might hurt us within this particular window, but over a longer window, over a longer range of possibilities, we absolutely need that. And then I think the last bit of that I'll say is also then holding us, to that decision that we took. I think getting everybody to sign up and say, hey, we chose to operate within this band of possibilities. Now that it's here, we took that eyes wide open, right? And now we deal with it.
Yes. I think your second point is very well that you made the choice, we stick with this, follow it through, and this is where The organizations who make bold strategic decisions stick with it for a long term, regardless the leadership changes. I mean, classic example is Walmart supply chain, Zara supply chain, Shein supply chain, Dell supply chain.
Precisely.
It doesn't matter who is in hand, they have. So the way I see that the strategy is almost become part of institution rather than a leader,
Correct. Correct.
right?
And that's a whole lot harder to do than it is to say. Right. And I
Yes.
think that's the challenge that now that we're in the boardroom, I think we can now reinforce that message around here's how and why we're making these sorts of choices. And importantly, that becomes part of our strategy. It's not an annual planning choice. It's a strategic choice.
It's not like if you were the new CSCO and he came in, he put all these strategies together, he goes in and everything dies. That's what happened. Like, so you made a valid point, and I think you also made a valid point on always look into total cost of ownership rather than the isolated sort of event, right?
Right.
This is where the some naysayers always say, oh, it's going to cost us 40,000 pounds to implement this machine for better packaging. Yeah, but look at the total, because anything you do for sustainability over long term, you save money, not just save environment, you save money. So total cost of ownership is, I think, also an important concept to acquire.
Step there real quick, but actually, I think it's also important though that that doesn't become an excuse for us to just sit on it. Yeah. So it's important that we constantly reassess. Have those conditions changed? Right? Is there another way for us to resolve that allows us to perhaps take out some cost or improve efficiency or even improve our resilience? And that for me is where that continuous improvement and learner mindset that we don't get locked into what made sense last year still makes sense this year. And so I frankly, I personally always welcome the challenge from from my finance colleagues or my sales colleague to say, well, hold on, why does this have to cost us $40,000? Why can't we do it for $30,000? Because it becomes a question of maybe something has changed, or if it hasn't changed, the time it's an opportunity for us then to reinforce, well, here's why we're still where we are. So I think it's really important that that doesn't become an excuse not to do something because, well, it's for resilience or sustainability or for quality.
You have an advantage, right? You're a finance guy, so your CFO won't mess with you a lot, right? Unlike who's a typical supply chain folks. Anyway, so we have to learn finance. Now, I want to move the discussion toward technology. I don't want to go deep into the what is LLM, agentic AI system, multi orchestration, all that. It's
Right.
just getting too much. I want to focus on the two angles of capability.
Hmm.
One would be, as we know, in last 18 months, the rate of change in terms of technology being innovating and it's moving at the pace, it's so fast, right?
Yeah.
If you compare that pace with the rate of adoption in supply chain, given the fact all supply chain folks are super busy, they don't have time to anything to learn. And even right now, I try to coach people, they don't even use Copilot correctly, even just, okay, just rewrite the email and that's about it, right? It's ridiculous how the rate of adoption is slow. So my part A of the question is how the leadership, sh- what they should do to increase the rate of adoption, first part. Yeah. And second part is what are the capabilities you think is needed now in supply chain to
Yeah.
adopt the technology faster than we are doing it as we speak?
No, I think what you described are actually two related points. I think the first thing that we really need to tackle is sort of the second bit that you mentioned. When you have the tools available to you, do you use it? And it becomes a question of, well, why don't people adopt some of the tools that we already have? Before we can get into the AI conversation, whether that's Gen AI or even agentic AI, which is even more complicated to architect for, we still have to figure out how to crawl, how to stand, how to walk, how to run. And a lot of organizations are still on the front end of not really using the tools that we even have today. I mean, I recall, with SAP, how many people are using BI inside of SAP just to extract data and visualize versus running a report and just dumping it into Excel and wanting to then do it in Excel versus some of the tools that we might already have. I think that for most leaders, it's really important for them to create the context where their people want to leverage additional tools. And that's really about transformational discipline. It was true for BI, it was true for Excel, it was true, for email as it's going to be for AI. It's gonna be about really what's the vision for where and what this tool is intended to be used. And then how are you reinforcing the value of that tool to the people? I always recall at the town halls, when you're having a town halls, are you talking about this tool? Are you praising Joe because Joe is using the tool the way that he's supposed to? Are you reminding people on an ongoing basis about, I want to see this adoption go from 10% to 20% to 50% to 75%? And are you sustaining that? Because what I tend to find is we roll out the flashy tool and we talk about it for the first week, first month, but you come back to month 6 and we're not talking about it anymore. And as leaders, I think that's where it's really important that we sustain the vision that we laid out on the front end. So that is probably one of the most important elements, right? That we have the vision and we manage the transformational journey for whatever the tool is. And then that then allows us to then accelerate with the technologies like AI. And I think the reality is with AI, because it's more invasive, it's more pervasive across all of the activities, whether that's in supply chain, as well as everything that's happening around the supply chain. It's really important that leaders have a much sharper transformational mindset than a lot of us have had historically. We want the flashy tool, we want to get to go live, but then we don't want to sustain the discipline that's required after that to bring it to life.
Yeah.
That might have gotten us that we might have been able to live with some of that in the past, but if we're really getting into AI and agentic AI, it really won't work going forward.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's been not now, I've been saying it for last 2, 3 years to all my customers, especially, buying technology, creating technology is the easier part, right?
That's actually absolutely the easy part, yeah.
Hardest part is to deploy and make people use, i.e., create engagement. So this is where the change management is required. So I created a B2B system for my client. They have to deploy for 400 customers. To create the software took 3 months. It took 18 months to deploy.
Yeah.
Right. So 6 times to make people use, and you have to really be at it. The same thing happened with the technology now. So that I want to lead this, I think, very good discussion to the next part, because the adoption and engagement only happen when there is a continuous culture of learning, right? Okay, and I see, especially in supply chain, um, it doesn't really exist. And now let me, because SCM Duo is a training and learning platform, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to name a customer in UAE. It took us, and one of them, actually two customers, one of them is one of the leading brands. If I even tell you one brand, you would know, right? It took me 18 months to even convince them to deploy a training program for 15 people, like
Right.
15 people sampled, which is basic, simple training on trade management, logistics, cost optimization, SNOP, and so on and so forth. So it's ridiculously slow there, right?
Yeah.
It just shows the training and continuous development is back burner, right? So first of all, do you agree with me or not? And I think one of the biggest reasons the engagement is low and the change management is not happening is because of lack of this culture. And no, I'm not talking I think it's globally is the case. As you've been involved with ASCM, right? And right now, if you look into ASCM and Mr. Supply Chain, Daniel Stead, and a few, they're writing loads about it. They're losing members, they're losing money, their membership is down. I think so. It's rather than this culture of continuous learning and improvement, it should go up. In my view, it's going down. But what do you think?
Yeah, so we could the ASCM, that's a whole nother conversation in terms of what, some of the conversation I'm seeing on LinkedIn. Um, you're right. Continuous improvement is a hard culture to sustain because it's very easy for us to want to get into where we want predictability. We want, we want a very specific answer at a point in time. And so we get caught into inertia of just being responsive to that next one thing that comes along that we have to do something about. Continuous improvement is about constantly stepping back and leaning into unpredictability, into uncertainty, and bringing new information in and then assessing, well, what does this mean? Right? So it's going away from a sense of certainty to a sense of uncertainty in the sense of, well, this might mean I have to do something different. This might mean what I did yesterday was wrong. Not it was a bad decision, but it was wrong. And I think a lot of people get uncomfortable in that space. There's a reason why, whenever you run a lean workshop, you go in and you want to go through your Timwoods, there's a reason why, frankly, without much work at all, I can consistently find 10 to 15% of costs that you can take out or efficiencies that you can improve without a whole lot of work. Because that inertia that happens is just easy to sustain. Continuous improvement, that's why I go back to that culture of curiosity. I think as a leadership culture, whether you're at the C-suite, you're the VP, the GM, the director, or just the team lead, it's about being willing to ask, well, why do we do that? It's not about getting into the S&OP room and saying, well, demand is going to be up 10% next year, and sales pats itself on the back, and you as a CEO saying, that's great, love it, let's go do it. Ask why. Well, why is that going up 10%? What are we doing to get it up 10%? Well, what does that mean for our plant in Dubai? Hey, does that change anything for us on the procurement side? Are you asking questions, but not asking questions in terms of trying to, as gotcha questions? Well, that procurement guy doesn't know. Oh, he doesn't know who our supplier is in Dubai, so I got him. No, it's about being genuinely curious about, well, what are the implications? Well, why do we think that? What does that mean? Have we considered doing something different? If you are modeling that as a leader, and you're willing to then take information in as a means of refining or improving your decision making, that's a culture that slowly starts pervading throughout the organization. That doesn't get rid of it because, again, we're humans, and oftentimes it's easy for us to just get comfortable. I fall into the same trap. But it's about how do you consistently look for ways to bring new information in that challenges your assumptions or the way that you've been doing things. That is critically important in operations today, and it's gonna be critically important as we try to bring in technologies like AI into our processes going forward. And I think that's why I go back to that, crawl, run, crawl, walk, run, right? If you're not doing that today, it's gonna be virtually impossible for you to try to do that in AI. So that is almost a prerequisite of a culture you have to try to build in to allow you to leverage the full value set of AI in your organization.
Mm. So, keeping that crawl, walk, run, and the culture of uh, continuous improvement, continuous ask questions in mind, and you mentioned about technology, I want to move to this AI. Obviously, one of the technology you're pretty excited about. But if you look into next 10 years and think of what would be the emerging technology which you think gonna really reshape supply chain, and you think is it will be embedded like in ERB of our life or supply chain. What do you think? What?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I'm excited about agentic AI. I was struggling with Gen AI as a solution space because of the challenges that, it is not algorithmic or deterministic enough across its capabilities. But agentic AI, the opportunity to really create sandboxed areas where
Yeah.
the tool can both learn and act on that information that it learns, I think is really exciting. This is where now you can start taking discrete activities inside of a supply chain. Because look, reality is you can break a supply chain down. Yes, they may be hundreds, thousands, millions of interactions, but there's some very discrete activities across the supply chain that you can start packaging agentic AI into. I think that's a plausible opportunity, and for me, that's one of the most exciting things. As a matter of fact, I'm working through what I hope to be a, sort of a 20 episode podcast to explore, is agentic AI that plausible route to the autonomous cognitive supply chain that we've been talking about for years? Right. And I think a lot of what we've talked about is really foundational elements around the leadership, the culture, the people capabilities. Right. But it's also about exploring where and how could you bring agentic AI into elements of your supply chain and progressively build out a more autonomous cognitive supply chain. For me, agentic AI is the most exciting, with the wrapper of Gen AI that now allows you to interrogate why is that the way that we're approaching it? It goes back to that culture of continuous improvement and learning, right? The ability for you to use AI in a way to have a conversation within your supply chain in ways that you couldn't before. The example I always think about is, if say I had a hiccup, right? I had an order that needed to be delivered, it was delayed. In the past, I might have needed my vehicle scheduler or my transportation contract person to be there for me to think about, well, how do I resolve this transportation delay? With Gen AI, I can now have that conversation with the AI that I might not need Larry to tell me, oh, well, trucker A is delayed. Well, you can now go to trucker B. Right? Now, and two things. One, I can now more people can participate in resolving issues with your supply chain. But B, guess what? I am now freeing Larry up to not have to answer Derek's question about, well, what happened to truck A, right? So now Larry can do higher value activity. But so I'm really excited about the agentic AI that can go execute, and the Gen AI that allows us to interact, engage, and interrogate in a way that we haven't been able to in the past.
I, I, I think it's super exciting topic, and definitely I can talk more on this, but I'm gonna say a few things just to support what you said and add what you said. Generative AI alone with agentic has still had the limited application and functionality, but with the new reasoning models, right? And because they can plan, execute, and reflect, which
Yes.
generative models cannot do, still cannot do, the typical ones, is the game changer, right? Because I mean, we made a very simple application, and I'll show you. Talked about our SMDujo will change right now. We call it SMDujo AI Consultant. So you can ask any question which is trained on SMDujo or the other Learning Academy. You can execute stuff. For example, you can connect your email just with us, and it will pass all your email. It will say what PO, where's the shipment, what is late, where's the reflection. So agent will do all of this, which is the job of the coordinate, right? And right now you have to search plenty of emails. Now we have a lot of diagnostics. So you go through all the diagnostics, and at the end, based on the body of knowledge or proprietary body of knowledge, it will not just give you recommendations. It will actually gonna say, do you want me to do this action? Do you want me to go and improve this for you or create this new procurement strategy or SNOP strategy for you document, right? So the only thing you did is just diagnostics. So it's definitely gonna increase. I think what is difficult part here is there is my experience talking to different function people is because and you as well,
Mm.
that there is if you talk to engineering people or marketing people, I think they have the more affinity towards adopting change or technology faster, I think, because of the job functions they are in.
Right.
If you talk to finance folks, they are more reserved. If you talk to supply chain folks, we are rather more reserved.
Right. Absolutely.
And because of the nature of the job, that you can't take too much risk or don't have time to too much risk. And I think I would strongly recommend that this should change, right, within the supply chain folks. And as you said, your podcast will be successful. Now, at the end, I would just want to jump into Quickfire. But before I jump into Quickfire, anything which we have missed and you think is important to, get it out there, you can think of?
Sure. I kind of want to come back real quickly to what you just said, because I think it's really important. I think it's important that we strike the right balance between the technologists and the supply chain practitioners, right? The technologists have a vested interest in going fast, right? The open AIs and the Anthropics and the Kinaxis and O9s of the world, absolutely, right? And God bless them. Yes, there's an urgency there. it's also important that we as practitioners bring that grounded reality about what that really means. Because in as much as I'm excited about Gen AI, Agentic AI, and where the technologies can take us, that's going to be a messy journey. That's gonna be a convoluted journey. There are gonna be a lot of mistakes made, let's be brutally honest. Either we picked the wrong technology, we picked the wrong provider, we deploy it too soon, too late, right? But that's where I go back to why that culture of curiosity and continuous improvement is gonna be vitally important, because we have to be able to have the honest conversations of, "I went left, oh boy, left didn't work, I now need to go right." Yeah? I'm excited about it, but I'm also, in many ways, I think this is going to be where we really have to step back, redesign, rethink, and recreate the way in which we as supply chains work. And for me, that's really exciting to fix some of the things that, candidly, we should have already fixed without AI. But now we have another opportunity to tackle as part of that journey that we're on today. So I just wanted to double click a bit on that point that you were making.
No, you are valid point, valid point. So I'm going to read now my quick five questions. Right? You ready?
Yeah,
Okay. Yes. Good to go.
I'm good to go.
All right. One word that defines your supply chain philosophy.
Superpower. Take an organization superpower.
Yeah, that's a good one. A book, course, or mentor that shaped your career.
Oh boy, too many choices. Too many choices.
Give one.
I'll, I'll share a book, The Art of Action. It's about really how do you take strategy and bring it to
Yeah,
life.
that's a good one. Um, the most unappreciated challenge in supply chain today.
Ooh, we talk about it, but I don't think we appreciate unpredictability. The world is unpredictable, and we have to embrace it versus trying to keep controlling it.
Oh, so. No, valid point. That it, I think we shouldn't see that as a continuous problem. We should see that as a mere reality, which always going to be present, and how we just need to build capability to deal with it.
Exactly. It's a design feature of life.
Yeah. One piece of advice for young professionals just entering in the field.
Ooh, I'd go back to my favorite word. Just be curious. Ask questions. Do not be afraid to challenge and just inquire why. We have it. We call it the five whys, right? In continuous improvement. Ask your five whys.
Yeah, and this the famous book of Simon Sinek. Start with why.
Exactly.
All
Exactly.
right. No, Derek, it's been. I mean, I could talk to you more. We almost spent 45 minutes or 40 minutes plus. It went by quite fast. Yeah, but super quickly is very interesting. Thanks for your time. Thanks for sharing your knowledge, and I appreciate you joining our podcast.
Madasher, it was an absolute pleasure. Look forward to many more of these conversations.
All right. Thank you, folks. Thank you for watching. As always, if you like the content, like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next episode. Ciao.